My name is Ingrid Holloway. I'm 37 years old. Last October, I sat at my mother's dinner table while she smiled at me and said, "This is your final dinner in this house." She meant it as a threat. She had the whole family gathered, my aunt, my cousin, her boyfriend, and she looked so sure of herself, so completely in control that I almost felt sorry for what I was about to do. Almost. I slowly pulled a document from my bag and slid it across the table. "Yours, too," I said. My mom read it once, then she read it again. Her face went from pink to white like someone had pulled a plug. "You can't do this," she whispered. But I could, and she knew it. Before I tell you how I ended up across that table from my own mother, please take a moment to like and subscribe and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're all listening from. Now, let me take you back 20 years to a house on Riddle Creek Road and the night my grandfather died. The house sat at head end of Riddle Creek Road in Garner, North Carolina. A one-story with a gray shingled roof and a porch that wrapped around the front like an arm pulling you in. My grandfather, Earl Pewitt, built it himself in 1978. Laid every board, hung every door, dug the well before the county ran water lines out that far. Grandpa Earl was a carpenter by trade and a quiet man by choice. He didn't talk much at family gatherings, but on Saturday mornings he'd hand me a sanding block and let me work beside him. I was the only one he did that with. I was 15 when he sat me on that porch and said something I didn't understand at the time. "This house ain't wood and nails. Bertie, it's a promise." Bertie, that's what he called me. No one else ever did. He died 2 years later. Massive stroke. Middle of the night, I was 17. My mother got the phone call at 6:00 a.m., set the receiver down and said, "Well, it's done." No tears, no trembling chin, just those 3 words, flat as a countertop. I remember standing in his empty workshop the day after the funeral, running my hand along the workbench he'd sanded smooth over decades. His coffee mug was still sitting there, a ring of dried black at the bottom. The whole place smelled like sawdust and linseed oil. I cried in that workshop for an hour. When I came back inside, my mother was already on the phone with someone. Her voice low, her back turned. She hung up when she saw me. I didn't think anything of it then. I was 17 and my grandfather was gone, and I didn't know yet that what she'd taken from me had already started. 1 month after the funeral, my mother called me into the kitchen. She was standing at the counter with a mug of coffee she wasn't drinking, her arms crossed tight. I could tell she'd been rehearsing something. "Your grandfather didn't leave a will," she said. "There unc nothing, just this house and a pile of debt." I asked if there was a lawyer involved, someone we should talk to. She waved her hand like I'd suggested something ridiculous. There was no lawyer. He died the way he lived. No plan, no preparation. I'm the one who has to deal with all of it now. I was 17. I believed her. That spring, I got accepted into a pre-law program at NC State. I'd been working toward it for 2 years. Mock trial, AP government, a letter of recommendation from my civics teacher that I still have somewhere in a drawer. My mother sat me down the same week the acceptance letter arrived. "You think you can just run off to college while I'm drowning here?" she said. "The mortgage on this house alone. Who's going to help me? Who's going to keep the lights on?" There was no mortgage. The house was paid off. Earl Pewitt didn't believe in owing banks, but I didn't know that. "After everything I've done for this family," she said, "you want to leave me here alone? That's the thanks I get." I withdrew my application the next day, took a job as a cashier at a hardware store off Route 70. Gave my mother $300 a month from my first paycheck and every paycheck after. I didn't know she was lying. I just knew I couldn't be the daughter who walked away. That was the first surrender. It wasn't the last. The years blurred together the way they do when you're stuck in a pattern you can't name. At 19, I moved back home, just temporarily. My mother said, "I need help with the gutters and the plumbing. You know I can't do that alone." I paid for their repairs. Temporarily turned into 3 years. At 23, I told her I was looking at apartments in Raleigh. She set her fork down at dinner and said, "You'd really leave your mother in this big house alone." I stayed another year. At 27, I landed a better position at an office supply company. Decent salary, benefits, room to grow. My mother didn't say, "Congratulations." She said, "Does that mean you'll send more?" At 30, I enrolled in an online paralegal certificate program. I did the coursework at night after my shifts. My mother found the textbooks on my nightstand and said, "Still chasing that lawyer dream? Some people just aren't cut out for it, Ingrid." I finished the certificate anyway. That was the first thing I did in 16 years that she didn't talk me out of. At 31, I finally moved to Raleigh, rented a one-bedroom apartment near Capitol Boulevard. My mother called it the betrayal. She used that word betrayal like I'd committed a crime. Even after I left, I sent her $400 a month. She said it was for the mortgage. There was no mortgage. She said it was for upkeep. The house my grandfather built with his hands didn't need $400 a month in upkeep. But I sent it because every time I thought about stopping, I heard her voice. "After everything I've done for you, every dollar I sent was a brick in a wall she was building around me." 14 months before the dinner, my mother met Ray Beckett at church. She called me on a Tuesday to tell me about him. "He's a good man," she said with a brightness in her voice I hadn't heard in years. "A plumber, works for himself, solid." By the 3rd month, Ray had moved in. By the 6th, he was tearing off the old roof and replacing it with architectural shingles, new deck by month 9, fresh paint inside and out by month 12. My mother sent me pictures like she was flipping through a home renovation magazine. "Ray's really investing in our future," she said. "I asked your future or the house's future." She hung up on me. The first time I met Ray, he shook my hand too hard and held it too long. "Your mama's told me all about you." He said, "She's done a lot for you, honey. I hope you appreciate that." He said it the way you'd talk to a teenager who forgot to take out the trash. I was 36 years old. Over the next few visits, a picture formed. Ray walked through that house like a man measuring walls for furniture he hadn't bought yet. He talked about the property and the lot and what the market was doing in Wake County. At Thanksgiving, he told my Aunt Vivian that Garner was about to pop and that sitting on paid-off real estate was the smartest thing a person could do. My mother smiled the whole time. Ray put his arm around her and squeezed. That Christmas, she mentioned it for the first time casually like it was nothing. "Ray and I have been talking about making things official." The house, I mean. I didn't respond, but I heard it. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in early October. "Sunday dinner," my mother said. "The whole family, I have an announcement." Her voice had that particular brightness, the one she used when she'd already made a decision and wanted an audience to witness it. I recognized the tone the way a dog recognizes a leash. "What kind of announcement?" I asked. She laughed. "You'll find out with everyone else," then sharper. "And don't bring that attitude. This is a happy occasion." I called my Aunt Vivian that night. She didn't know any specifics, but she'd picked up the same signal. "Your mother sounded like she was planning something big." Vivian said, "She keeps saying Ray needs security, that a man needs to feel like he belongs somewhere." I sat on my couch in my Raleigh apartment and stared at the ceiling. The math wasn't hard. Gloria plus Ray plus announcement plus the whole family equaled one thing. She was putting Ray's name on the deed. She was giving away my grandfather's house to a man she'd known for 14 months. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay running through the same loop. Call her, confront her, ask her to wait. But I already knew how that conversation would go. She'd tell me it was none of my business. She'd say I was being selfish. She'd remind me of everything she'd ever done for me, and I'd hang up feeling smaller than when I'd dialed. Except this time, something was different. Something I'd learned at work, a skill I used every day for other people's families, was quietly rearranging itself in my mind. I didn't know yet that my mother couldn't give away what was never hers, but I was about to find out. Wednesday morning, Morrison and Grant Estate Law, downtown Raleigh. I'd been working there as a paralegal for 3 years, filing motions, drafting correspondence, pulling records. The kind of work that makes you invisible to the lawyers and essential to the cases. That morning, I was running a title search for a client. Routine. Pull up the Wake County Register of Deeds website, type in the property address, trace the chain off ownership. I'd done it hundreds of times. Halfway through, I stopped. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. If my mother was planning to sign a quick claim deed, that meant the property title had to be in her name, and titles were public record. Anyone could look them up. I could look them up. I typed in the address on Riddle Creek Road. The result loaded in under 3 seconds. The deed was recorded in 2005, the year my grandfather died. The grantor was the estate of Earl T. Pewitt. The grantee line read, Gloria Holloway, trustee of the Earl Pewitt Testamentary Trust for the benefit of Ingrid M. Holloway. I read it 3 times. Each time the words got louder, not on the screen, in my chest, trustee, for the benefit of Ingrid M. Holloway. My grandfather had left me the house, not my mother. Me. He'd put it in a trust, a legal trust, with my mother named as the person responsible for holding it until I was ready to receive it. And she had never said a word. I closed the browser tab, opened it again, read it a 4th time. The words didn't change. I pushed back from my desk and walked to the break room, poured a cup of coffee I didn't drink. My hands were steady. Everything else was shaking. I didn't need anyone to explain what a testamentary trust was. 3 years of estate law had taught me that much. A testamentary trust is created through a will. The person who dies, the giartor, leaves property to a trustee who holds it for the benefit of someone else until certain conditions are met, usually annage, usually 21. My grandfather set it up so that my mother would manage the house until I turned 21. Then she was legally required to transfer the title to me. Full ownership, my name on the deed. I was 37. She'd been in violation of her fiduciary duty for 16 years. I pulled up the probate records next. The will had been filed with the Wake County Clerk of Superior Court in 2005. The trust had been established and funded. The property had been transferred into the trust. Everything was documented, dated, and recorded. My mother had walked into a courthouse, filed the paperwork, accepted the role of trustee, and then gone home and told her 17-year-old daughter that her grandfather left nothing. I sat in my car after work that evening with the engine off. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there with the kind of clarity that comes after something breaks clean. She told me he left nothing. She said there was no lawyer. She made me give up law school so I wouldn't learn enough to find out. It wasn't random cruelty. It was a system. Every choice she'd made, pulling me out of school, keeping me close, making me financially dependent, had one purpose: to make sure I never had the tools to ask the right questions. My mother didn't just take a house. She took the education that would have let me find out sooner. I picked up my phone that night and dialed her number. Got through 3 rings before I stopped. If I called now, she'd deny it. She'd twist the conversation until I was apologizing for asking. She'd cry or shout or go silent, whatever tool worked fastest, and by the end of the call, I'd feel guilty for finding out the truth. That was the pattern. 20 years of it worn smooth as a path through grass. I set the phone down. For the first time in my life, I chose not to react. Instead, I made a list. I wrote it on the back of a gas station receipt because I didn't have a notepad in my car. Find the original trust instrument. Find the lawyer who drafted it, Harold Pewitt. Verify the exact trust terms. Understand my legal rights. Prepare everything before Sunday. Sunday was 4 days away. 4 days to confirm what 20 years had hidden. The next morning at the office, I told Marin Torres. She was the other paralegal at Morrison and Grant. 34, direct, loyal in a way that didn't require a lot of words. We'd worked side by side for 2 years. She was the closest thing I had to a best friend. I showed her the deed printout. Read it twice, then looked at me over her glasses. "You've been her paralegal your whole life, Ingrid," she said. "Time to be your own." I asked if she thought I was wrong for not calling my mother first. "She kept you from law school so you'd never read the fine print." Marin said, "That tells you everything." She was right, and Sunday was coming Thursday. I spent my lunch break searching the North Carolina State Bar records. Harold Pewitt, licensed 1974, retired 2009. Last known address, Garner, North Carolina. He was still alive, still local. I found his number through a public directory and called from my car in the Morrison and Grant parking lot. It rang 5 times. I was about to hang up when a slow, careful voice answered. Pewitt residence. I told him my name. There was a long silence, the kind where you can hear someone adjusting to a memory they hadn't touched in years. Bertie, he said. Earl's Bertie. Something cracked open in my chest when he said that name. Nobody had called me Bertie in 20 years. I told him what I'd found. The deed, the trust, the fact that my mother had never transferred the house. Harold went quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet, heavier. She never gave you the house, he said. It wasn't a question. No, sir. He told me he'd drafted everything himself, the will, the trust instrument, the whole estate plan. Earl had come to his office in the spring of 2005, 6 months before the stroke, and laid it all out. The house goes to Ingrid. Gloria manages it until the girl turns 21. Then it's hers, free and clear. After the trust was set up, I called Gloria to remind her of her obligations. Harold said, "She told me, I know what I'm doing, Mr. Pewitt. My father trusted me. I didn't follow up after that." He paused. "Your grandfather asked me to watch over things, and I didn't. I'm sorry for that, Ingrid." Those were his exact words, and they meant more than he knew. Friday morning, I took a half day and drove to Garner. Harold Pewitt lived in a brick ranch house on a street lined with crepe myrtles that had already dropped their blooms. He met me at the door in a pressed shirt and suspenders, moving slowly but standing straight. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for someone to come asking. His office was a converted bedroom at the back of the house, shelves of legal binders, a wooden filing cabinet, a desk lamp with a green glass shade. He opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet and pulled out a cardboard filing box labeled Pewitt Earl T inside a copy of my grandfather's will, the trust instrument, the probate records, a letter of instruction. I opened the trust instrument first. The language was clean, formal, and unmistakable. Upon the beneficiary reaching the age of 21, the trustee shall convey all right, title, and interest in the property to the beneficiary by executing and recording an appropriate deed. My name was on the third line. My grandfather's signature was at the bottom of the last page. Steady, deliberate, like everything he built. Harold walked me through it. Because Gloria never executed the transfer when I turned 21, she was in breach of her fiduciary duty. She had no legal right to treat the property as her own, and any quitclaim deed she signed to transfer interest to Ray Beckett would be void because she wasn't the owner. She was the trustee. "When is she planning to sign that deed?" Harold asked. "Sunday," I said. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with his handkerchief. "Then we'd better get to work." He offered to prepare an affidavit, a sworn statement confirming the trust's authenticity and his role in drafting it. I accepted. While we worked, Harold mentioned something I hadn't known. "Your grandfather didn't just leave you the house." He said, "There was also a savings account, $38,000 held in the trust." I set down the paper I was holding. "Gloria was custodian of the funds," he continued. "Same terms to be distributed to you at 21. I knew before I checked. I already knew, but I checked anyway." That evening, I called the bank listed in the trust documents, a regional branch in Garner. The trust account had been closed in 2008, the full balance withdrawn by the trustee. I was 20 years old, 1 year before the funds were supposed to be mine. I sat at my kitchen table and did the math on the back of an envelope. $38,000 from the trust account, gone, plus $400 a month I'd sent my mother for the past 10 years. $48,000 total. She had taken my inheritance and my paychecks. I remembered 2008 clearly. That was the year my mother showed up to Thanksgiving in a new Buick LaCrosse. Metallic silver leather seats. "I've been saving for years," she told the family. "Finally treated myself, $38,000. She turned my grandfather's savings into a sedan and drove it to church every Sunday. I didn't throw anything. I didn't call her screaming. I opened a spreadsheet on my laptop, entered every figure I could document, and saved the file. Paralegal mode, the same focus I used for clients at Morrison and Grant, except this time the client was me. By midnight, I had a paper trail that stretched back 20 years. Bank records, deed history, trust terms, Everything my mother had taken, itemized and time-stamped. Facts don't need volume, they just need documentation. Saturday, I drove out to Riddle Creek Road under the excuse of picking up some old clothes I'd left in the back closet. The house was buzzing. My mother had Thegud china out, the set she only used for Easter and company. Fresh flowers on the dining table, candles. Rye was outside hanging a new porch light, his tool belt slung low like a man who already lived here, which I supposed he did. Tomorrow is going to be special, my mother said as I came through the kitchen. She was arranging linen napkins, linen for a Sunday dinner. Ray and I have worked so hard on this house. It's time to make it official. I kept my voice level. Official how? I'm putting Ray's name on the deed. He's earned it. I looked at her. She was smiling the way she smiled when she'd already decided something and was simply waiting for the world to agree with her. I tried one more time. Mom, don't you think we should talk about this first? Just you and me? She barely glanced up from the napkins. There's nothing to discuss. This is my house and I'll do what I want with it. I nodded, collected my clothes from the closet, said goodbye to Ray, who told me to bring an appetite tomorrow. Then I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel and breathed for 30 seconds. She'd said it herself. This is my house. There's nothing to discuss. For once, I agreed with her. There was nothing left to discuss. I drove straight to Harold Pewett's house. We had one more day, and we were going to use every hour of it. Harold's kitchen table became our war room. We spread everything out and organized it into a single folder, the certified copy of the deed from their Register of Deeds, showing the property held in trust for my benefit, the trust instrument, with my grandfather's signature. Harold's affidavit notarized that afternoon at the UPS store on Timber Drive, confirming he'd drafted the trust at Earl Pewett's direction and had personally informed Gloria of her obligations as trustee. And finally, a formal demand letter on Harold's old firm letterhead requesting that Gloria comply with the trust terms and cease any unauthorized transfer of the property. Harold had kept his bar license on inactive status. The letter was clean, professional, and left no room for misinterpretation. You don't need to raise your voice tomorrow, Ingrid, he said, placing the last page in the folder. The paper does the talking. I called Marin that evening, told her the plan. You sure about this? She asked, not doubting, checking. She told me yesterday there's nothing to discuss. She said it's her house. I paused. She chose to make it public. I'm just bringing the receipts. I'll have my phone on. Marin said, call if you need backup. I packed everything into my bag, the brown leather satchel my grandfather gave me for my 16th birthday. The stitching was coming loose at one corner, and the brass buckle had gone dark with age, but the leather was soft and warm in my hands, and when I held it I could almost smell the workshop. Sawdust and linseed oil. I set it by the front door and went to bed. I didn't sleep well, but I slept. Tomorrow the paper would talk. Sunday morning, gray sky, cool air, the kind of October day in North Carolina, where the light comes through the trees at a slant, and everything looks sharper than usual. I stood in my apartment bathroom and looked at the bag sitting on the kitchen counter. The folder was inside. The trust, the deed, Harold's affidavit, the demand letter, everything I needed, packed neatly inside a satchel that smelled like my grandfather's workshop. I thought about not going. I could call her, tell her I knew, give her a chancito handle it privately on her terms. Wasn't that the kinder thing to do? But I'd already tried that yesterday in her kitchen. Can we talk about this, just you and me? And she'd said no. She'd said it was her house and there was nothing to discuss. She'd chosen the audience, she'd chosen the stage, and if I called now, if I gave her warning, the deed to Ray would be signed by sundown. She'd have a notary lined up before I hung up the phone. I put on a white blouse and black slacks, the same thing I wore to work. No makeup. This wasn't a celebration. The drive from Raleigh to Garner was 40 minutes. I took Route 70, past the hardware store where I'd worked at 17, past the elementary school where my grandfather used to pick me up in his truck. The road hadn't changed. The houses looked smaller. I pulled onto Riddle Creek Road at 4:15. Ray's truck sat in the driveway. Aunt Vivian's sedan was parked at the curb. My cousin Bryn waved from the porch steps. I picked up the bag. The leather was worn smooth at her handles. Grandpa Earl would have approved. The front door was propped open. I could hear my mother's voice before I crossed the threshold. Bright, musical, the performance version of herself she used when she wanted something witnessed. The dining room table was stretched to its full length. 8 chairs, white tablecloth, the good china as expected, candles lit, flowers in the center, and a roast so large it could have been an altar. My mother came around the corner from the kitchen and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like hairspray and Chardonnay. There she is. Sit down, honey, big night. Ray stood by the buffet, pouring wine into glasses he'd lined up like soldiers. He shook my hand and said, "Good to see you, Ingrid. Your mom has been cooking all day." Aunt Vivian sat on the couch in the living room, her hands folded in her lap, the way she held them when she was uncomfortable but hadn't decided why. Uncle Dale was beside her, already working on a roll. My cousin Bryn was sitting water glasses on the table. I noticed it immediately. On the kitchen counter near the flower arrangement, a clear plastic folder sat open. Inside, a quitclaim deed form pre-filled. My mother's name in the grantor line. Ray Beckett's name in the grantee line. A pen clipped to the edge. She'd already filled it out. I set my satchel on the floor beside my chair, close enough to reach. Bryn leaned in and whispered, "Aunt Gloria keeps talking about the surprise. Do you know what it is?" I looked at the folder on the counter, then at my bag on the floor. 2 sets of documents in the same room pointed in opposite directions. "I have a pretty good idea," I said. My mother waited until everyone was seated and served before she stood up. She picked up her wine glass and tapped it once with her nail, a small, sharp sound that silenced the table. Ray straightened beside her. This was rehearsed. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began. "This house has been my whole life. I raised my daughter here. I kept it standing when nobody else was going to." She paused, let that land. Not a day went by that I didn't put this family first. Aunt Vivian nodded politely. Uncle Dale chewed. Bryn glanced at me. And for the last year, my mother continued, "Ray has made this house feel like a home again." She reached for his hand. He took it, squeezed, smiled at the table like a man receiving an award. "He's fixed the roof, the deck, the plumbing. He's poured his heart into this place." Another pause longer this time, so tonight I'm making it official. She looked around the table, letting the moment build. "Rye and I are putting his name on the house. This is our home now." Rye reached behind him and produced the quitclaim deed from the counter. He set it on the table beside her plate. My mother picked up the pen and signed her name on the grantor line with a flourish. No notary, no witness requirement met, just the gesture of it, the theater. Then she slid the paper toward me, not toward the table generally, toward me. She looked straight into my eyes with a smile that was equal parts triumph and warning. "I hope you're happy for us," she said. I looked at the signed form. I looked at my mother. I looked at Ray. Then I reached for my bag. I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever sat at a table where someone was making decisions about your life without asking you, you know exactly what that silence feels like. Right now, I had 2 choices. Smile and let it happen or open that bag. Before I tell you what I did, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. It helps more people find stories like this. And if you've ever had a family member try to sign away something that was yours, tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. Now back to that dinner table. My hand rested on the satchel, but I didn't open it. Not yet. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "Can I talk to you in the kitchen for a minute, just us?" She was still standing, still flushed with the momentum of her announcement. She waved her hand. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here. We're family. Mom, please." Her smile tightened. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Ingrid. If you have something to say, say it." Ray leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Let your mama enjoy her night, honey." I looked at Ray, then at my mother. The table was watching. I had asked privately yesterday in her kitchen, "Can we talk about this, just you and me?" She'd said no. Tonight, same question, same answer. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses to what she considered her moment. "Fine. Okay," I said. "You want me to say it here?" "I'll say it here." I unzipped the satchel. The sound was small, just the metal teeth of a zipper pulling apart. But in that quiet dining room with the candles flickering and 8 faces watching, it carried. My mother's smile slipped half an inch. I pulled the folder out and set it on the table. Not hard, not dramatic. I placed it the way I'd place a filing on a judge's bench. Flat, square, and facing her. Aunt Vivian stopped mid-sip. Bryn leaned forward. Uncle Dale put down his roll. Ray uncrossed his arms. I asked twice privately. Both times she refused. She chose the room. She chose the stage. All I did was choose the script. Before you go any further with that, I said, nodding at the quick claim deed, I need you to read something. In the half-second between setting the folder down and watching my mother reach for it, a memory surfaced, clear and whole like a photograph lifted out of water. Summer. I was 15, sitting on the porch with Grandpa Earl, both of us drinking sweet tea from mason jars. The cicadas were screaming in the pines, and the air was thick enough to chew. He just finished restaining the porch railing, and his hands were still dark with the color. He said it out of nowhere. Bertie, this house will always be yours. No matter what your mama says, promise me you'll remember that. I laughed. 15 years old, barefoot. No idea why he'd say something like that. Why would Mama say anything, Grandpa? He didn't answer. He just looked out at the yard, past the dogwood tree he'd planted the year I was born, and took a slow sip of his tea. Now I understood. He'd known. He'd watched his own daughter for decades, and he'd seen what I couldn't, what I was too young and too close to see. He knew she'd try to take it. He knew she'd lie. And because he knew words alone wouldn't survive her, he went to a lawyer, sat in an office, and put everything in writing. Couldn't protect me from her forever, but he could build something she couldn't talk her way around. I looked at the folder on the table. My grandfather's signature was inside it. His handwriting, steady, deliberate, the same as I remembered. 20 years old, still holding the line. My mother picked up the first page. I watched her eyes move across the words. I watched the color drain from her face like water going down a sink, and I waited. But I hadn't handed her the trust document yet. The first page was the deed Theprin out from the Register of Deeds, the same one I'd pulled up at my desk 3 days ago. She glanced at it, frowned, and set it down. "What is this?" she said. "Some kind of work paper." I didn't answer directly. Instead, I asked a question. Calm, clear, loud enough for everyone at the table. "Mom, just so I understand, you're saying this house is yours outright, free and clear." "Of course it is." Her chin lifted. "Your grandfather left it to me. I've kept it up for 20 years. And there was no will, no trust, no legal arrangement of any kind." Her eyes flickered. Just for a beat, quick as a blink, but I caught it. That micro hesitation before the lie. "Nothing," she said. "I told you that when you were 17. Nothing's changed. And you're signing this quick claim deed to add Ray's name because you as the owner have the right to do that. How many times do I have to say it?" She smacked the table lightly. "Yes." Around us, the family shifted. Aunt Vivian set her fork down. Bryn stopped chewing. Uncle Dale looked up from his plate for the first time all evening. Ray sat straighter, his jaw working like he was chewing something that wasn't food. My mother had just declared so in front of every person in this room, that she was the owner, that there was no will, no trust, no legal document that said otherwise. I needed her to say it, all of it, in front of everyone. Now she had. I turned the folder around so it faced her and opened it to the second page. The second page was the trust instrument. I slid it across the tablecloth the way she'd slid the quick claim deed toward me 10 minutes ago, gently, evenly, like it was nothing at all. "Before you sign anything else, Mom, I need you to read this." She looked down. The document was typed on cream-colored legal paper dated March 14th, 2005, 7 months before my grandfather's stroke. The header read, "Last Will and Testament of Earl T. Pewitt, Exhibit B, Testament Trust." Her lips moved slightly as she read. The table was silent. I could hear the candle flames bending in the draft from the kitchen window. She reached the operative clause. I knew exactly which line because I'd read it 50 times in the last 3 days. "Gloria Holloway, trustee of the Earl Pewitt Testamentary Trust for the benefit of Ingrid M. Holloway." Her finger stopped moving. She stared at the page the way you'd stare at a crack spreading across a windshield, watching it grow, knowing you couldn't stop it. "What?" She started, then stopped. Read it again. Slower this time. Ray leaned over. Gloria, what's it say? She didn't answer. Aunt Vivian rose slightly from her chair, craning her neck. Bryn's mouth was open. Uncle Dale had pushed his plate forward and was watching with the careful attention of a man who just realized the evening had turned. My mother looked up from the paper. Her face had gone white except for 2 spots of color high on her cheeks, like someone had pressed hot coins against her skin. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. There were still 3 pages left in the folder, but the room had already changed. "The Register of Deeds," I said. "It's public record. Anyone can look it up." I turned to the 3rd page, Harold Pewett's affidavit, and from Harold Pewett, the lawyer Grandpa hired to write his will. I paused. The will you told me didn't exist. Gloria's hand went flat on the table, pressing down like she was trying to hold the surface still. "Gloria," Rye said again, louder now, "what does it say?" Aunt Vivian had moved to the edge of her seat. "What's happening, Gloria?" My mother ignored them both. She flipped back to the 1st page and read it again, her eyes scanning fast, searching for something. An error, a loophole, a reason to say this wasn't real. She didn't find one. She looked up at me. Her jaw was tight. Her voice came out low, vibrating like a wire stretched too far. "You went behind my back. You went to that old man and you." "I didn't go behind your back, Mom. I went to the county courthouse. Anyone can do that, this is you can't." She picked up the affidavit and held it like she wanted to tear it. "This is 20 years old. It doesn't mean anything." "It's a legal trust," I said. "Executed and recorded in 2005, probated by the Wake County clerk and still in force." "You can't do this." Her voice cracked, not with sadness, with fury. Ray pushed his chair back an inch. Bryn grabbed her water glass and held it. Uncle Dale looked at Aunt Vivian. Aunt Vivian looked at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I didn't do anything. "Mom, Grandpa did 20 years ago." I stood and addressed the table. Not to lecture, to explain. These people deserve to know what they'd walked into. Grandpa Earl left this house to me in a trust. I said Mom was the trustee. She was supposed to transfer the title to me when I turned 21. She never did. Aunt Vivian's hand went to her mouth. "Gloria, is that true?" My mother's chin jutted forward. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," I said. "The trust is legally binding. That deed is on public record. I've confirmed it with the attorney who drafted it." I pointed to the quitclaim deed lying on the table. "And that form you just signed, it's worthless. You can't transfer property you don't own." The room went still, not quiet. Still, the kind of stillness where even the air stopped circulating. Ray spoke first. He'd gone rigid in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. "You told me this house was yours," he said to Gloria. Not gently. My mother wheeled on him. "It is mine." "The deed says otherwise," I said. "Your name is on it as trustee, not as owner. There's a legal difference. And it matters. Your grandfather had no right to. He had every right. It was his house. He built it. He paid for it, and he chose to leave it to me." Bryn whispered, "Oh my God," barely loud enough to hear. My mother gripped the edge of the table with both hands. Her knuckles were white. The candles kept burning. The roast kept cooling. Nobody touched their food. She looked at me the way she'd looked at me my whole life, like I was a problem she'd already solved. Except this time she hadn't. When cornered, my mother didn't retreat. She attacked. "I raised you in this house." Her voice filled the room. "I fed you. I kept the lights on. I stayed up with you when you were sick. I gave up everything. And this is how you repay me, with lawyers and paperwork." She turned to Vivian, arms open, palms up, the posture of a martyr. "You see this, Five? You see what my own daughter is doing to home in my house? At my table?" Vivian didn't respond. She was still reading the trust document, her glasses low on her nose. My mother turned back to me. "Your grandfather was a stubborn old man who didn't understand the first thing about raising a family alone. I did everything, everything. And he goes behind my back and signs some paper. 'Mr. Pewett called you,' I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to match her volume to outweigh her argument. He called you after the trust was set up. He reminded you of your legal obligation, and you told him, 'I know what I'm doing.'" I turned to the next page, the affidavit. "He put that in a sworn statement. He remembers every word. That old man doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a licensed attorney who drafted Grandpa's will," I said, "and he's willing to testify." My mother's face contorted. I gave up my life for this family. The words bounced off the walls and died. Nobody picked them up. I let the silence hold for 3 full seconds before I answered. You gave up my life, Mom, I said. Not yours, mine. Bryn's hand went to her chest. Vivian closed her eyes, and my mother, for the first time I could remember, had nothing left to say. The silence lasted long enough for the candles to flicker twice. Then Rye broke it. Hold on. He raised his hand like he was stopping traffic. I need to understand something. I put $15,000 into this house. New roof, new deck, paint, plumbing. If this is some kind of trust situation, who's going to pay me back? Every head at the table turned to him. Aunt Vivian spoke first, her voice flat. Seriously, Ray, that's your concern right now. I was told this house was Gloria's, he said, leaning forward. I invested based on that. He pointed at my mother. You told me this was yours, Gloria, free and clear. Those were your words. My mother opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked at Rye the way a person looks at a door that just closed in their face. Any renovations made to the property without the beneficiary's authorization are between you and Gloria, I said. Not between you and me. Rye stared at me for a long moment. Then he pushed his chair back, dropped his napkin on his plate, and stood up. I didn't sign up for this, he said. He walked through the kitchen, out the back door, and onto the deck he'd built with his own money. We heard his truck start 30 seconds later. Gravel crunched under the tires. The sound faded down Riddle Creek Road. My mother watched the back door for a long time after he left, her hands still flat on the table, her face emptied out. When she turned back to the room, I saw something I'd never seen in her before. She was afraid. Not of me, not of the paperwork, of being alone. Aunt Vivian had been reading quietly, methodically, turning pages the way I would, one at a time, absorbing every line. When she finally set the folder down, her hands were trembling. Gloria. Her voice was careful, controlled, but underneath it ran a current that made my cousin Bryn sit up straight. Daddy left the house to Ingrid, and you knew. Vivian, stay out of this. No. Vivian's palm hit the table. Not hard, but the plates rattled. You told me Daddy didn't leave a will. You told me that to my face. I asked you directly, and you said there was nothing. My mother's mouth worked, but the words stalled. Bryn looked at me, then at her mother. Mom, did Grandpa Earl leave anything for you too? I turned to the relevant section of the will. The page Herald had flagged with a yellow tab. Earl had left Vivian $15,000 in savings bonds. The executive, Gloria, was supposed to distribute them after probate. I slid the page across to Vivian. She read it, her lips pressed into a thin white line. $15,000, she said. He left me $15,000 and you took it. I didn't take you told me he left nothing, Gloria. You looked me in the eye at his funeral and said, there's nothing for any of us. And I believed you because you were my sister. The word sister landed like a stone. Uncle Dale put his arm around Vivian's shoulder. Bryn reached for her mother's hand. My mother stood at the head of a table she didn't own in a house she'd never had the right to claim. Surrounded by the family she'd lied to for 20 years. She had no allies left in the room. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke the way I'd speak to a judge. Measured, factual, respectful of the room. Mom, I'm not here to throw you out of this house tonight. I'm here to total you the truth that you've hidden from me for 20 years. She gripped the back of her chair. Her eyes were wet, but the tears hadn't fallen. They were sitting there, ready, waiting to be used. I'd seen those tears before. They were weapons, not grief. Here's what happens next, I said. You sign the deed transferring the title to me, which is what the trust required 16 years ago. If you refuse, I file a petition with the Wake County Court for removal of trustee and court-ordered distribution. The outcome will be the same. It'll just cost you more. I held up the quitclaim deed she'd signed for Ray. This is void. You were never the owner. You were the trustee. You had a duty and you violated it. Then I laid down the last term. I'm willing to let you stay in this house on a lease with clear boundaries for as long as you need to sort out your next step, but the title transfers to me. That's not a negotiation. This house was Grandpa Earl's promise to me. I said, you don't get to rewrite his wishes. She looked at me with a fury I'd felt my whole life, but had never met head-on. "You'll regret this," she said. "I've spent 20 years regretting my silence," I said. "That's done." I picked up my satchel, nodded to Vivian, touched Bryn's shoulder as I passed. Then I walked out the front door, across the porch my grandfather built, and into the October night. The air outside was cool and smelled like pine needles and someone's chimney fire down the road. I stood on the porch, the same porch where Grandpa had told me this house would be mine, and let my hands shake. They'd been steady all through dinner, steady when I opened the folder, steady when she screamed. But now, out here in the dark, with the porch light humming above me and the crickets going full tilt, I let them go. Bryn came out first. She didn't say anything for a few seconds, then she wrapped her arms around me and held on. "I can't believe she did that," Bryn said into my shoulder. "All those years. She's still your aunt," I said, "and you're still my cousin, that comes first." From inside, I could hear my mother crying. The loud, ragged kind, the kind that fills a room and demands attention. Vivan's voice followed, low and firm. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the voice of a sister who was done pretending. Ray's truck was already gone. The driveway held its empty shape in the gravel. I called Marin from the porch steps. "How'd it go?" she asked. "It's done. How do you feel?" I looked at Thesky through the pine branches. Stars were coming out in pieces between the clouds. Like I just sat down something I've been carrying for 20 years. Vivian stepped outside a few minutes later. Her eyes were red, but her posture was straight. She looked at me and said, "I owe you an apology, Ingrid. I should have asked more questions." "You didn't know," I said. "Neither did I." She pulled me into a hug that smelled like vanilla perfume in the house I grew Youp in. "I know some of you are thinking she should have just let it go. And honestly, a year ago, I might have agreed with you, but letting it go wasn't keeping the peace. It was letting someone else write my story. If this resonates with you, if you've ever had to choose between being liked and being honest, drop my turn in the comments and hit subscribe if you want to hear how this all settled. Because what my mother did in the weeks after that dinner, I didn't see coming. Now, let me tell you, 2 days later, my phone rang at 9 in the morning. Gloria, I answered because I told myself I would. Whatever she threw at me, I'd take the call. I owed myself that much. The proof that I could pick up and not fold. "I'm your mother." Her voice was horsero, swollen. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I waited. "I can't sleep. I can't eat." "Rye hasn't called. Are you happy now? Is that what you wanted?" "I'm not happy about any of this, Mom." She pivoted. I could almost hear the gears turning. "If you take Thistow Court, everyone in town will know. Every neighbor, the people at church. Is that what you want? To humiliate your own mother in front of everyone?" "I'd rather we handle this between us," I said. "But that's up to you." She tried a third angle, softer now, almost gentle, the way she sounded when she really needed something. "Your grandfather was old and confused when he wrote that trust. He didn't understand what he was doing. He was sharp enough to hire a lawyer and write a legally binding document," I said. "And you were sharp enough to hide it for 20 years. She hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after. The apartment was quiet. Morning light came through the blinds and stripes across the counter. I poured a glass of water and didn't drink it. Then I opened my laptop and typed a note in the case file I'd been building. Gloria refused voluntary compliance. Proceed with petition. She'd spent my whole life teaching me that love meant never saying no, but love without truth isn't love. It's a lease. And she'd been collecting rent on it for decades. I didn't file the petition alone. My boss at Morrison and Grant, senior partner Catherine Grant, had heard the story by then. Marin told her. I'd expected a polite nod and a referral. Instead, Catherine called me into her office on a Wednesday afternoon and said, "I'll take the case pro bono. Your grandfather set up a clean trust. This should have been resolved 16 years ago. The petition went to the Wake County Clerk of Superior Court on a Thursday morning. 3 counts. Removal of Gloria Holloway as trustee of the Earl Pewitt Testamentary Trust. Court ordered distribution of the trust asset, the house on Riddle Creek Road to the named beneficiary, and a full accounting of the trust's financial assets, including the $38,000 in savings that had vanished in 2008. We attached everything: the trust instrument, the deed, Harold's affidavit, the bank records showing the closed account. Gloria was served the following Monday. Vivian told me later that when the process server left, Gloria sat in the kitchen and stared out the window at the backyard for over an hour. Didn't move, didn't call anyone. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a correction. 20 years overdue. I thought about my grandfather, how he'd sat in Harold Pewett's office and planned all of this, hoping it would never be needed. How he'd trusted his daughter to do the right thing and built a safety net in case she didn't. He trusted the law to protect me, even if my mother wouldn't. The least I could do was follow through. The court date was set for 6 weeks out, but it never got that far. Gloria hired a lawyer, a court-appointed attorney named Dennis Webb, who specialized in family trusts. He was straightforward with her. I know this because his office sent a settlement proposal 2 weeks after the filing. The proposal was simple. Gloria would voluntarily comply with Thetra's terms, execute a deed transferring full title to me, and agree to a structured repayment of the documented trust funds. In exchange, I would drop the petition and allow Gloria to remain in the home under a written lease agreement. Her attorney told mine off the record that he'd laid it out plainly. If this goes to court, you lose and the court record becomes public. Every detail. Gloria signed the deed on a Tuesday at Dennis Webb's office in downtown Raleigh. I was there. She sat across the table from me, signed her name without looking up, and left without a word. No eye contact, no goodbye. The deed was recorded at the Wake County Register of Deeds that afternoon. The clerk stamped it, filed it, and handed me the receipt. Recording fee, $26. I held the receipt in my car for a long time. $26. That's what it cost to put my name where it should have been since I was 21. 20 years and $26. That weekend, I drove to Riddle Creek Road, parked in the driveway, didn't go inside. Gloria was still there, and the lease terms hadn't started yet. I just stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house, the gray shingles, the wraparound porch, the dogwood tree my grandfather planted the year I was born, its leaves turning red at the edges. For the first time, I was standing in front of that house as its legal owner. The feeling wasn't triumph, it was recognition. I let my mother stay. Some people won't understand that after everything she did, the lies, the stolen inheritance, the years she kept me small, I let her stay in the house. But I didn't do it for her. I did it because eviction wasn't the point. The point was the truth. The point was the line. We drew up a lease agreement. 12 months, rent zero. Gloria would cover utilities and basic maintenance. No modifications to the property without my written approval. No additional names on anything ever. She signed it the same way she'd signed the deed. Quickly, silently, like touching something hot. The financial accounting took longer. The $38,000 was mostly gone, spent, scattered, untraceable in the way cash becomes after 20 years. But Gloria agreed to repay $22,000, the portion we could document, in monthly installments. It would take years. That was fine. The number on paper mattered more than the speed of the check. Vivian received her $15,000. She told me she'd put it in a college fund for Bryn. With the recovered trust money and my own savings, I did something I'd been waiting to do since I was 17 years old. I applied to the part-time JD program at Campbell University School of Law right there in Raleigh. I wrote my personal statement in one sitting. Every word of it was true. They accepted me in January. Bryn called every week after the dinner. We'd never been close before. The family's quiet divisions had kept us at arm's length. But something had shifted, she'd say, just checking in and mean it. I didn't take my mother's home. I took back mine. And then I gave her the chance to stay on terms we both understood. 6 months later, I walked into a lecture hall at Campbell Law School and sat down in the 3rd row. I was 37. Most of my classmates were 23, 24, fresh out of undergrad, clean notebooks, highlighters lined up in color order. I had a second-hand laptop, a legal pad, and a brown leather satchel with a loose stitch at the corner. The professor opened the first class with a question. Why law? Hands went up around the room. Career goals, family expectations, a passion for justice. I listened to every answer and didn't raise mine. I knew why I was there. Because someone had used the system against me and I'd survived by learning it. Because my grandfather believed a piece of paper could outlast a lie. And he was right. Because my mother had kept me from this room for 20 years. And I was done letting closed doors define what I could walk through. I didn't say any of that out loud. Some things don't need a classroom. That evening, I called Harold Pewitt. He picked up on the second ring, the way he always did, like he'd been sitting by the phone. First day of law school, I said. There was a pause, then a sound I'd never heard from him before. A short, rough laugh that broke into something warmer. Your grandpa would have driven you there himself, Bertie. Inside my satchel, tucked into the inside pocket, I kept two things. The $26 receipt from the Register of Deeds and a photocopy of the new deed with my name on it. The professor handed out the syllabus. The first course, Property Law 101. I opened the textbook, page 1, property, the rights one holds in land. I smiled. For the first time, he understood that sentence in my bones. People will tell you that standing up for yourself means you don't love your family. That's not true. It means you finally love yourself enough to stop pretending that silence is the same thing as loyalty. My mother and I still talk. Not often, not deep, but we talk. And for the first time in my life, she talks to me like someone who can say no. Maybe that's not healing, but it's honest, and honest is more than we had before. Grandpa Earl couldn't protect me forever. He knew that he was a carpenter. He understood that everything he built would eventually need someone else to maintain it. So he gave me the one thing that would outlast him. Paper, a trust, a deed, a promise written down and filed with the county, where no one could talk their way around it. If you're in a family where love comes with conditions, where every boundary you draw gets called a betrayal, where the price of peace is your own silence, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not selfish for protecting what's yours. You are not ungrateful for knowing your own name. The truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. And the moment you stop carrying someone else's lie is the moment your life starts belonging to you. Last Saturday, I drove back to Riddle Creek Road, parked in the driveway, walked up the steps, and sat on the porch, the same spot where my grandfather used to sit with his sweet tea and his sawdust hands. The dogwood was in full color. The porch boards were solid under my feet. The house stood exactly where Earl Pewitt had placed it 48 years ago, one nail at a time. The house on Riddle Creek Road still stands, and so do I thank you for staying with me through this whole story. If you've ever had to set a boundary with someone who told you that you owed them everything, I see you. Drop Riddle Creek in the comments so I know you made it to the end. And if you're sitting there right now thinking about what you would have done at that dinner table, tell me. I read every single comment. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. There are more stories in the description. Go check them out. I'll see you in the next one.